There's a video that they show on Democracy Now! Every time they discuss the Charlottesville protest. In my mind, the short clip has become synonymous with the event. Every time I see it, there's a moment that strikes me, though at first I couldn't explain why. I've watched over and over again for over a year as the crowds collide in an awkward brawl, and every time I'm struck by an instance that has little to do with the clash of ideologies on that Saturday morning in 2017. The curved wooden handle bouncing around on the ground. It's only in the frame for a second, but it catches my attention every single time I see the clip. I then see a man holding an umbrella to the left of the screen, hopping around, full of adrenaline, but seemingly not knowing what to do. Why did this brief and seemingly inconsequential moment strike me? It affected me even more deeply than the video of the car that plowed through the group of people, killing Heather Heyer and transforming the weekend from an event into a disaster. It's because the man reminded me of my dad. Not that he looked anything like him, but it sent me back to the first time I went to a protest with my parents. It was a march for peace at the start of the Iraq War. All of us were dressed head to toe in pink, my dad beaming with bright pink baseball cap on, with a peace sign embroidered in the front. Every time I see that man in the clip, I see my dad hopping around with a broken umbrella, and it breaks my heart. And the whole thing started over a Confederate monument. And while this wasn't the only Confederate monument in the news, the disaster that it inspired represents a fracture in the American identity. And this fracture was immediately contextualized into established ideological definitions. White nationalists, neo-Nazis, and the alt-right were named quickly, while the other groups' definitions shifted from counter-protesters to Antifa to the neologism, the alt-left.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? Let me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day.
When I saw this video on the news, all I could see was the man that reminded me of my dad holding the broken umbrella. The alt-right, a neologism invented by white supremacist Richard Spencer, has been covered extensively by the news and has had the opportunity to set the terms by which they and their opposition have been defined. This means that the counter-protester, Heather Heyer, is definitionally linked with the protester who murdered her with his car. Heather Heyer becomes a homo sacer, rendered as a spectacle instead of a sacrifice. Thus, I propose a short documentary film that opens up the definition of those now referred to as the alt-left to the complexity of the real through choreography.